현재 진보조는 님미장 zon은 모놈 진보는 감지한다. 바그르다는 감산도 절말도. 톰바드 제장라 기숑자를 내 저로 저링이 정금선 저거 특집전로 일라면 지금 번조장라 소란. 공기 도방 버려 신기로 공기 도방 버려 신기로 공기 도방 버려 신기로 또화이
The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter. Unabili yams now I see it, hear it, receive it, and capture it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate supreme bodhicitta.
Lami hurmit panbaran yer lama hurmit lama hurmit magam vamo hafler nam leki ngan song tongjer yang jewe chelar jiao song na tsen per digtrip tagbaran yer vipa pama nyin tor ne nam shi karti ma shi pa pan mangchang nyin nam Ninir nam chechir ngoyang mashi na styev chimbur kagzigla tape tajang takpshang tsar dan chak sim jagam san jot na shangchib sen khwir kam thayir nang ni nyang ni nin nyang ni 到时候把这些改一下啊，最后的版本。俺送结讲对来他儿，同米三吉马多人呢，学我的学习龙腾头，那么的想起这么多被康什么考虑等个来。Jori nyarje semki ne sarnyar kagzik shibki na rendo tamchid nyarnjib chang leki vjiba leta leki vjibli xtanda jor ganjig mdorde xloba yi marig semchin jorndot be samgi mekyab tamje jang mdorde flagji nirjit gir dedag leki vjibe de tagchin mdorde nzinma ni me togr pudang zabtong dang zetche kuji sarnyam chodo chigzang sarnyam dunjig de nyamtsang chiki tongshi na sem kede zhi nga ringar pong jang sem ki zhi nga ringar pong jang shachang dolog zintsig dang chukchud dunchig jigsam pong simjig pong zirchig sem kuyim san jod nar milim tayir rkim tong jang sadni wongbor norin gir Tenem dorde tubar nam tserang chirtung jidmin gir gangzak di na senhua yi sam kepa shirab tubu semchin gurbu nat shung dang kim gji nyamrgit kurnam tur rmalam tamchid mabde dang doba vjind mandrabe sarnyar kala ki dad na Mandut ganjang jibaran jar malam tamchid devar nang zeku pasum tsuk zeku pansuk layi zhung gangjik nangra chimtso dang marung tikjan xchangzin mu nzhigdun lungnak tarkabi gnes jigbaran dobayi sarnyang senhui rkav azigla tajang chigmchid shijir na ridang naqtsar gyamso yin jigba tamchid jibaran jar xiangzig dakka tsigla sun sarnyang Yundam sammatya kara chirtung varta yang kiwi nimtab juntab jar kiwi nimtab juntab jar ganjik sarnyam santu ne rkigzigim jarjang chigshidi me tuqr puku zaptung suq gyartung chope dela shodo shanchim chogdo ngushin na kartig sangi kienchen de tinab shangzig kyunkin tsar Shirni de Janglab Jopper Sha Sai Nyang Sai Mulam Jim Dole Tongtu Ji Panyun Tambi Legerte Chirni Bago Dice San Jomden Deji Pombak Sir Jim Dokchante Kyang Shlariam Shanchu Sanwa Chimbo Sai Nyambu Shur Jagte Ndar Tar Ndarkat Katsarpa Sai Nyambo Kyoji Zimchi Jistom Samji Mekyo Kyoji Shambadang Nyangji 교기 셴바다 녀제 삼기 매치 교기 시럽 삼기 매치 교기 뽑밥 삼기 매치 축지 삼기 담지기 교기 삼기 매치비 잡비 가르와 처처 동처 남서 흑버 자장 디임타는 잡바 맘치소 사이냠보 당더더 qasımçı tsaqsım기 하이그네 Gyartong shiwa chakki jyotme pi sangye dang shangchib sangwa namdang haqlar devgil la sobi drowar namgi charne lariyan kangsam korwa mei ur tabi gni pi la dang mi drowar namgi chet chunda kyolak tabrab shago kyoki drowar ndatak nyanag chigdang zhig chigda yang ngansong gongne sirtongda mavjig na karwa gyartong chak shiwa chakki warda tarwa mamchi bi Sammi par ngi nyarwa nar mepi nyarwa namsir tonda magjik banar mu maggoso sayi nyambo zawanglanga semchin dadagna shirgit mangi bana waqchik ngamba mangwe giwi sem chonz kejam nirdan jigbar nyarla mamtam berkin ngamba dam chanar kachik riri shindam perin gyuru dinab dakka kyang gyartong shiwa chag gi gzigr nambar natsuk jinruwar namgi kamdang wangbodang mubadang tanni ndarar shiba yano sayi nyambo dakar lariyang zhuwa ladang mirnam kyolak tabar gyuwa yano maung jikten namsi lagam rikji wamo gangjik sangji ji tambalak gewa chonzib giba te panyag chigdang dirchan chigdang shema chigdang chitig chigzam shiba te yang kyokib shenlab dang nibalab tenne gangzak te dag zhong zhang kyobar shago tenne rimgi blana me pi shang chible shirmar dobar shago
This book I have in my hand is the ornament of a great vehicle, Sutra Shastra. And this book over here is the advice on living and practicing, the advice given by Phuntsogor Rinpoche to his disciples back in 2016. I would post a Weibo every day, and I would post a piece of teaching given by Phuntsogor Rinpoche, as well as attaching a picture of Phuntsogor Rinpoche. Different teachings and different pictures. So that's the story of this book. Well, what does that mean, your clappings? Let's continue with Ksitigarbha Sutra today. Well, we still need to finish the long verses of the 12th chapter. So today we'll finish this part. Over here, the world elder once said these verses, and the majority of the teachings given over here are very similar to the ones from the previous classes. There are some differences, but some are similar. So over here, we will explain shortly on each of the verses. Let's look at each of them. First of all, the first verse, Buddha said that contemplating Ksitigarbha's divine power, indescribable in kalpas as many as all of Ganges sand, in all instant of admiring, hearing, and homage. Over here, the divine power, you can think of it as the blessings. And such kind of blessings, such kind of divine power of wisdom, of compassion, of this kind of blessings cannot be described in kalpas as many as all of Ganges sand. And this number is inconceivable. It is difficult to count the numbers of the sands in Ganges River, nor had anyone counted the kalpas, the numbers of kalpas. Therefore, over here it means that for a great number or a great long extended period of time. In Chinese language, including the Chinese translation of the Great Sutra of Liberation, whenever they talk about 100 million, 100 million, a billion, 10 billions, and 100 billions, and so on. In fact, that 100 million is the translation in Tibetan language as 100,000 rather than 100 million. So we can see that the great translators from previously, their translations are a bit different. They have their different ways of understanding or of translating numbers. The Indian tradition also have their ways of talking about numbers with metaphors. Over here, it means that the divine power and merit and wisdom cannot be expressed in a long period of time. Even the Buddha cannot express that. So, whomsoever in a short period of time, in even one instant, if that person were to admire, hear, and pay homage to pay homage to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, then boundless benefit generated for those in the realm of devas and men. The merit that could be brought by paying homage or admiring and hearing the name of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, then such merit would be extensive. Therefore, as we can see that this sutra was taught in the celestial realm, but not only to the celestial beings, it is to both men and devas. If one were to pay homage and to admire and hear the name of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva even for one instant, then the merit is boundless. Therefore, even if you cannot chant a whole text of Ksitigarbha Sutra, of course that would be great, but even if you don't have time to do that every day, then maybe on a Sunday when you're free, when you have no affliction, when you eat well, when you're warm, and when you have all those well-favored conditions, then you can chant the Ksitigarbha Sutra or chant the name of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's name. That could bring boundless merit to yourself as well as sentient beings. And then the Buddha continued to say in verses, saying that be it men, women, nagas, or gods, blessings exhausted and shall fall into suffering realms. Originally, all these kind of beings, the nagas, the celestial beings, women, men, gods, they probably created lots of negative deeds, and because of their negative deeds, they will definitely be reborn in the three lower realms of hell realm, hungry ghost realm, and animal realm. But because they've already generated sincere homage, they've already generated sincere admiration and paid homage to take refuge in Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and for such reason, their lifespan will be extended, and their negative karmas will be dissolved. I just remembered that I forgot to tell you the story of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, so maybe I will tell this story now. And later, when you are doing the transcript, you can put that story at the beginning part of this class. We've already know that the merit of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is boundless, and making the statue of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva or making the images of him would be of great benefit to the relatives. So this story also further demonstrates such point. Back in Tang Dynasty, there was an authority. He himself is a devoted Buddhist, but his parents are non-believers, and they refuse to study Buddhism. And then later, he built a golden-colored Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's statue that is about 1 meter of height. And he himself also would go and pay homage and make offering to that statue. Though his parents do not have any belief, but this image definitely brought lots of benefits to the parents. There was once that his father, as well as himself, went outside, and his mother were staying home alone. At night, a thief sneaked into the room and wanted to steal something from his home. And then the thief saw a monk sitting over there, and he got really scared and then ran away. Then the second day, the thief returned, wanting to find out who was that person. So the thief dressed up differently and came into the home during the day and saw there was only the old lady, as well as the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's statue. Other than that, there was no one else. And he right away knew that it must be Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. That was the monk. So he got really scared. And then he confessed and told the story of his encounter last night. So that was the blessings the mother received from Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. In terms of the father, there was once that his father went out and his enemy was waiting on the way and was ready to murder him. When the enemy saw the father approaching, at that time a monk who dressed up in gold appeared, and then the monk got cut for 3 times and then fell on the ground. So the father was extremely terrified and then ran back home. On one hand, he felt really sorry and sad for the monk who died because of him. On the other, he felt extremely fortunate because he was able to run away and he's still alive. So he went to the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva statue and wanted to pray and make dedications. And once he entered the door, he saw that on the head of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's statue, he saw this 3 knife marks, sword marks, and though the marks are golden, but there are some blood colors on it, and that's when he knew that he was actually saved by Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. From then onwards, he would call up on his wife and son and make offering, as well as pay homage and pay reverence to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. And he generated a great faith towards Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Around the age of 79 years of age, the father passed away. After 35 days, the son had a dream, and he dreamt that he dreamt of his father, who looked quite magnificent, and the father told him that he is already he's already taken rebirth in heaven, in the celestial realm, because of the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. And the father said that our whole family will be able to be reborn in Pure Land. After after 13 years, the mother was reborn in Pure Land, and after 25 years, he himself also died and be born in Pure Land. And 28 years later, the wife of his also died and was reborn in Pure Land. That was the prediction given by the father. And later on, just like the father predicted, they all died around the similar time. So the local people around that area, they felt this is indeed quite unusual, and they all generated great faith towards Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and all received various benefits and insights. And for this reason, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva statue was very famous in history. And this taught us Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva would give blessings to the family members, though they may not have any faith towards Buddhism. It could be our parents, our children, it could be our loved ones. Maybe they don't have any faith, and it might be difficult for us to help them in this lifetime. And under this kind of circumstances, if we were to build a statue for the benefit of them, or chant the Sutra of Ksitigarbha, or make offerings to the Buddha's image or the sutras or texts, then in this way we could be directly or indirectly benefit them for this life or the next, because of the merit and the dependent arising is inconceivable. So we should definitely practice these kinds of meaningful actions for our family members. Now let's continue. Where it says that losing parents or loved ones in one's youth, don't know their spirits' whereabouts. If there are people who lost their parents or loved ones at a very young age, but they have no idea about their rebirth, the whereabouts of their rebirth, or brothers, sisters, or other loved ones, and never knowing what they looked like. Some of these kinds of the printings over here is not really correct. I really don't know how it looks on your text anyhow. So let's continue to look at this. Over here it says that even even if the siblings are still alive, or the relatives and friends are still alive, but you probably don't even know them anymore. In this case, you can forge or paint Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Mahasattva's images and diligently admire and pay homage, chant the Mahasattva's names for 21 days. The Bodhisattva's immeasurable body will be displayed. The manifestation of Bodhisattva will be displayed, and he will tell you where the whereabouts of the family members and of the children. Some of the deceased ones, we don't really know their whereabouts, or even if they have not died yet. For example, there are people who lost their children. Some of them, they may have already died. You cannot find them anymore, but some of them may be kidnapped. So for these kind of people, if you were to supplicate to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, you will definitely receive good results. Even if your relatives or your friends were to to be reborn in the three lower realms, they will gain liberation in a really short period of time if you do not lose or retrogress on your devotion and faith towards Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and if you do not retrogress with the faith you have for the three jewels, and if your compassion do not retrogress, then you will definitely be able to receive the blessings and predictions from the Bodhisattva. So for the parents who lost their children, even if you cannot find them in this lifetime, even if you cannot get them back in this lifetime, if you were to pay reverence and to take refuge to the images and statues of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, the children will definitely receive peace and happiness. So those resolve to cultivate a supreme Bodhi, including those seeking in living suffering of Trilokia, since they already resolve great compassion. So for this kind of people, should first pay homage to Mahasattva's images. I believe the majority of us are the Mahayana practitioners. As for the Mahayana practitioners, on one hand, we really want to receive the supreme Buddhahood, attain the supreme Buddhahood. On the other, we really want to renounce from the samsara. And if you want to have all of these said above, you have to generate supreme bodhicitta and pay reverence to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. And if you want to fulfill your vast wish, you have to have great motivation as well as the great assisting power. Otherwise, in this dark age, there are lots of the powers from the demons, from the external, from the outside. And therefore, only by relying on your personal power, it's very difficult for you to continue to pursue to fulfill your vast wish. There are lots of people who have great motivation to begin with. They want to get ordained. They want to observe their pure precept. They want to generate supreme bodhicitta. They don't want to harm any sentient beings, but it gets really treacherous, and only a very small number of people could accomplish what they wish for. So for those of you who want to generate supreme bodhicitta and who want to attain such kind of supreme fruition, it is the best to supplicate to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, Manjushri Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, and all these great Mahasattvas, as well as the manifestations and the supreme wonderful friends, wonderful spiritual friends, as well as the Vidyadhara such as Pamasambhava, and as well as the great protectors who made promises and taken their vows in front of Padmasambhava. If we were to receive the help from all of these above, then your wishes would definitely be fulfilled. Your vast wish can be accomplished in a swift time. I believe we have all kinds of wishes, all kinds of worldly wishes, and for the Mahayana practitioners, I believe that we all have vast wish, such as attaining enlightenment as soon as possible and so on. Or whenever we see that sentient beings are suffering in this ocean of samsara, the birth, old age, sickness, and death, as well as and the different kinds of suffering of leaving the loved ones, all of these kinds of suffering. But because we don't have great power, we are just like a mother without arms. We only watch our children being carried away by great flood, but cannot do anything about it. We only see people suffering from their sickness, from their poverty, from their negative karma, but we cannot do anything without the power from the great Mahasattvas, without the power of our, without such kind of great power of attaining enlightenment, then what we cannot really do anything. We can only witness the sentient beings getting closer and closer to be reborn into the three lower realms, but cannot save them at all. We can only witness with great sadness. If we really want to fulfill our wishes in a short period of time, we have to supplicate to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. In such a way, your vast wish can be fulfilled. Otherwise, your great wishes can be interrupted by your negative karma. There are lots of people who would generate great motivation when the spiritual teacher is giving you a very motivating teaching, and then people would raise up their hands. I want to liberate sentient beings, such as when I was attending the World Youth Buddhist Symposium. I witnessed lots of young, enthusiastic young people. They make their vows very easily. And then after hearing the teachings such as praises on the dependent origination and practices of 37 practices of Bodhisattva, upon hearing those, they vowed to liberate sentient beings and propagate Dharma. But later on, because of the great power that disturbed them from the world, they would easily forget about their initial vast motivation, vast aspiration. So the power of this ocean of suffering is really great. Our short, momentary motivation can be easily covered by the clouds. And within a short period of time, we don't really know our directions anymore. So it's really important for us to make supplications. Anyhow, there are those who resolve to chant sutras, resolve to deliver those gone astray. Although resolve such inconceivable vow, those have what has been read are soon forgotten. Much time and effort wasted. Such people are obstructed by past karma, hence cannot memorize Mahayana sutras. Make offerings to Ksitigarbha with incense, flour, clothes, food, or various antiques. Place clean water before Mahasattva. After one day and night, devoutly drink this. Resolve devotion and avoid 5 pungent plants. Avoid meat, alcohol, sexual misconduct, and lies within 21 days. Abstaining from killing, devotedly contemplate Mahasattva's name. So you can contemplate, you can think of, you can practice upon Mahasattva's name, and then immediately you shall see Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's immeasurable body in their dreams. Awaken and acute ear attained. Then in this way, you will be able to attain this high capacity of receiving the teachings through your ear. Upon hearing sutras just once, never forget in millions of lives. It is Mahasattva's inconceivableness enables such wisdom to begin.
所以，对，就是我们这个
In mainland area, they usually would talk about the samadhi of prajna paramita practice, as well as the 7 days Zen meditation retreat. For us, we only have 7 days to practice the Ksitigarbha Dharma assembly, and within the 7 days, we would use the method of making the 5 offerings and then chant the supplication as well as the names and mantras of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. According to the Sutra of Ksitigarbha, it says that if one were to make offerings of, if one were to place some water that is pure and clean in the mandala of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and then chant the mantras to bless this water, then at the end of the last day, at the end of the day to receive the cities, usually that is the 21st day or 7th day, the last day of the practice, the great practice. So in this way, we can see that the Chinese Buddhism, or we can see that the esoteric and exoteric Buddhism are very similar. The last day is the day to receive blessings. So I have heard that during the 7 days of chanting Amitabha's name, such as the Samadhi of Prajna Paramita, I have never really participated in those, but I heard that people had to keep chanting the name, and if they feel that they're falling down, they have to keep walking. They would practice in such kind of diligent way. This is really wonderful. And we can see that according to the Ksitigarbha Sutra's method, if we were to chant the name of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva for 7 days, we can place the water over there in the mandala and then drink it after.
然后呢，就讲到那个，那么念地藏经的，或者是
the ones who chant Ksitigarbha Sutra or hear the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's names, then the poor sentient beings, the ones who suffer from poverty, can be benefited. We can see that the merit of sentient beings are very different. There are sentient beings who have some merit. Before they depart from this world, they can practice generosity to generate more merit before their death. But majority of people, even if they have lots of merit, they tend to be very stingy. We can all contemplate upon our own lifespan. How long can you live in this world? When it's time for you to depart from this world, who is going to receive all of the things that you accumulated in this lifetime and all the wealth you've accumulated in this lifetime? I think you are very clear about that answer. Of course, we cannot give away all of our food and clothing and everything away. We should save some for ourselves for the daily use as well. There are people who have lots of great merit, but they don't really practice on generating more merit for themselves. And there are people who don't have great merit, but they are very devoted. And I think for these people, you can save some for yourself. That's necessary as well. I myself, I don't think I'm a good practitioner, but I am very good at contemplating upon impermanence. Whenever I see others who have lots of wealth and status, or who looks really beautiful, the kind of people who are admired by all the worldly heavenly beings, I usually would generate my first thought as that all of these are impermanent. It's not going to be long-lasting, especially the new president or whomsoever received a higher status. I would contemplate upon whomsoever is at a high place would definitely fall, and there's really nothing so great about this. And if there are people who are very wealthy, I would think that whatever gathers would definitely disperse, and there's really nothing so wonderful about that either. This kind of impermanence is very intrinsically ingrained in me. I didn't really purposely think of that, especially after the age of 23, after I started to receive the genuine education of Buddhism. Wherever I am, whatever time it is, let it be summer, spring, and fall and winter, let it be on the car or eating, I myself would use this kind of impermanence. I myself have this kind of contemplation on impermanence all the time, and I don't get discouraged because of impermanence. Rather, I get more diligence with impermanence because I cherish the opportunities more. There are people who think that impermanence is slacking off, is very pessimistic, but I don't think so. I consider I am very optimistic and I'm very diligent. Though everything is a dream, but even inside our dreams, we should accumulate merit as our provision. Because without understanding the impermanence, if we were to understand impermanence, we will, if we don't understand impermanence, we will get uninterested, or we would slack off and don't really want to do anything. We can see that the life, wealth, and everything of sentient beings are impermanent. And in this world, people don't want poverty, they don't want sickness, they don't want misfortune. But it happens in lots of families. But it is just like what we say as suffering upon suffering. Lots of suffering would come one after another. For example, the parting of relatives, the parting of the loved ones, and divorce. I heard because of such kind of, because people want to avoid the greater loss of divorce, people would sign a prenup. They would say that I have such and such savings and you have so and so assets. Then we should sign this prenup so that we know who will get what if we get divorced. I don't think we have this kind of prenups in Tibet. The other day, my sister called me and said that one of our relatives divorced, and she went there to herd all the yaks back. I said, didn't you herd all the yaks to their family last year? It's less than 1 year of time. How did you get all the yaks back again? Because the costume of Tibet is that usually one family would give such numbers of yaks, and the other family would maybe bring some other things or other yaks. And then whenever the herders get divorced, then they would divide whatever materials they have or whatever things that they have together. We use black tents, and when people get divorced, they would split it in half, and on the left side is for the woman, on the right side is for the man. But now people would count the tent as one thing, because after you cutting the tent into half, nobody could use it. So they would say that, well, one person would get a tent, and then the other person would maybe get a yak or coral or other things. Nowadays, I think the tents are white. And I asked that, did they use white tent as well? And my sister said, yes, it is a tent, and the woman got the tent. Sometimes I think listening to these kind of stories, it's really favorable conditions for our practice, because when people get married, all the yaks are gathered together, and within 1 year of time, when they get divorced, all the yaks are herded separately to their separate families. Your yak, my yak, they all go to different directions. So from the worldly being's point of view, a good family and happy family is very important. Let it be divorce, let it be bankruptcy, let it be layoffs. All of these kind of things are very painful for any worldly beings, because they're forced to face a different type of life. And they're under the pressure of all kinds of social pressure as well. Nowadays, there's a popular word that is bug passing, which means blaming on the others. In fact, not only between countries, there are the kind of incidents of bug passing. There are lots of our volunteers who also would blame the others. They would say that, well, I got expelled, it's only because so and so told on me. But whenever we look at these kinds of unfavorable conditions, because we feel uncomfortable with these suffering and pain, and then at that time, people tend to blame the others, especially if they don't have any wisdom and practice insights. It will be very difficult for them to face. Also, for people who tend to have lots of lots of nightmares and or insomnia, especially insomnia, because of the because modern people have lots of pressure, so insomnia became more and more popular, more and more common rather, and because of the pressure and anxiety and tension, all kinds of situations could lead to insomnia. I think in the earlier time, maybe people don't have lots of wealth, but they sleep really well. But nowadays, people would consider to sleep well is really important. It's a really happy thing. If you were to, maybe because of food, maybe because of pressure, and all kinds of conditions, if you cannot fall asleep, then you should supplicate to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. In that way, you don't have to take sleeping pills. And for the kind of people who want to get who cannot get what they want, their wishes and the results are towards different directions, then they should supplicate to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. So devoutly pay homage to Ksitigarbha statues. All misfortunes shall be eliminated, even attaining peace in both dream and sleep, protected by gods and ghosts, and abundance of clothing and food obtained. These kind of protections are really important. We need the protections from Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, and we need the protectors. Because in such a way, if we have these protections, we can live in this world quite smoothly, without too much turbulence. Look around, we notice that there are people who encounter misfortunes at all times. Maybe they're not keeping up with good health. Maybe they get despised by the others, looked down by the others. Maybe their financial situation is not great, and they don't keep well with the people around them. They have a terrible mindset, and they don't practice well, and it seems that their whole world is completely gray and bleak. But and then when they want to commit suicide and want to end everything, and then they feel they don't want to give up on themselves either. And then they arrive at this dead end. They don't really know what to do to continue. There are lots of people who are in that kind of neck bottle. So now, the practitioners, if you are immersed in the view of Buddhism, this is quite important. If you were to have such kind of view, then you will be able to gain the insights of Buddhism. And then you understand how important it is to have a devoted faith and to supplicate to the Buddhas and to receive the blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And that could transcend, that kind of transcendental knowledge is quite meaningful. Lots of Western scholars as well as religious personalities, they tend to be very arrogant. Sometimes they despise the Eastern religions because they feel that in the West they produce lots of scientists, and for a period of time they have not encountered any economic crisis, and they are of good development in terms of their finances and their economy. Whenever people are enjoying fortunate circumstances, they tend to be very arrogant. But later on, if they were to encounter any crisis in terms of their economy, or if they encounter some kind of spiritual crisis, psychological crisis, then they feel like they need to go to Nepal, Tibet, or India and to seek for nourishment from Eastern philosophy such as Buddhism. And slowly they will be able to notice how arrogant they used to be. Because they would realize that the worldly wealth, fame, technology, even after obtaining all of them, none of those can really resolve the problems of our life as well as our psychological problems. But in the Eastern philosophy, all the teachings are definitely beneficial to human life and to the practice. And then they would feel that they will be able to receive, to fully accept the teachings given by the great masters from before. The teachings such as the words of my perfect teacher and all the practice, they're willing to accept them. I've met some of the senior professors from the West. They often would talk about how they felt really arrogant around the 80s and 90s, 70s and 80s, and because after Second World War, they feel that they are at the top of the world, especially the ones from United States. But later in life, they encounter lots of treacherous problems, and they consider that they are saved by practice. And they feel that they received great blessings from the masters, and that's how they can attain peace and calm their mind. Indeed, a group of great masters who went to propagate the Dharma to the West, they not only have great fame, indeed they have the power to tame the being's mind. So from certain levels, definitely all these great masters had tamed these professors, the scholars, and help them to attain wisdom and peace. So we should definitely think about how to help sentient beings to pacify their suffering, their doubts, and their wrong views, rather than only thinking about what should I do, what should I do. We should try to save ourselves from these kinds of afflictions, to liberate us from these illusions. It is quite difficult to liberate sentient beings. But when our mind is at peace and is calm, we should focus our energy on liberating sentient beings who are still suffering. Nowadays, lots of people believe only science. And I think for Buddhists, not only lay practitioners, but also monastics, we need to learn how to combine both Buddhism and science together to help others to understand Buddhism. Of course, in our short period of time, we will not be able to have the time to study all the scientific fields, but when it comes to the mind, when it comes to the practice, we should be able to understand what the scientists would say, would explain, and how Buddhism explains this. There are people, there are teachers in schools, they probably understand some of the teachings, they probably understand some of the so-called science, but when it comes to the understanding of human mind, the human conscious, the now science is still a blank. Including materialism, the Western scientists, they feel that the mind is produced through material. But how? They have no idea. How could mind generate from the brain? They have no idea. None of the scientists had any great discovery. But from the understanding of Buddhist logic, it is that, first of all, you have to understand what the seed is and how the seed would produce the fruition, and how the cause and fruition has to make a link. Otherwise, they won't be able to understand it. Upon knowing some of the neuroscientists, I think we should make further discussions with them. I know that lots of great masters had lots of those discussions with the Western scientists. But after the discussion, many neuroscientists and the brain scientists at the end, they have to come to conclusion that the teachings of Buddhism is indeed very meaningful. Why is that? Because the scientists usually think that our consciousness comes from our brain, but we know that what our brain looks like. Let it be cerebrum or cerebellum, let it be the neurons. In fact, I've been to lots of labs. I saw that there are so many billions and trillions of neurons, of webs, but those are not unusual. In the exoteric teachings, there are not too much explanations on it, neither does the Abhidharma, but in the Tantra teachings, the teachings on neurons are very detailed, such as there are 72,000 channels in the brain, and there are 500 sub-channels in the brain. Especially this is taught in Kriya Tantra and Charya Tantra, and all of those have a function to the touches and the sense of touches and so on and so forth. Lots of the neuroscientists, they feel that in our brain there are different areas. This area is it has the function to control our memory, some are to control our pressure, some to understand cognition, some is to have the different different functions, but can we understand it in such a way? Can we understand consciousness in such a way? It doesn't. But according to Buddhism, according to the Tantra, it says that indeed the root consciousness, root faculty is based on our brain, and the consciousness depend on our brain to understand the object, but the consciousness is not born from the brain. We should understand that out of all the scientists, everyone would consider that the neuroscience is the most complex, because nobody really knows what produces consciousness. But this is taught in Buddhism in a quite clear way. It taught the consciousness, alaya, and then the 5 faculties, as well as how the brain controls each function of it. And because of the different functions of different channels, it creates different consciousness, but it does not give birth to consciousness. But the scientists would consider that the brain would, in certain areas of brain, if it is harmed, then we would lose a sense of feeling in our body. For example, the foot lost its sense because there is some of the connections to our brain. On that level, we do admit it. We consider that it could be true. But on the other hand, this is only the faculty of touch from our body, but the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and consciousness are much deeper. On top of that, if we were to talk about the Jnana Sattva and the Dharmakaya, those are much more in depth. So from the level of consciousness, I think it is understandable that scientists don't understand it, because consciousness cannot be detected through different kinds of machines and different kinds of numbers and different analysis through the body, through little lab rats. Even if you cut the flesh into pieces or study a patient who does not have any sense of touch or does not have any sense of cognition, these kinds of research, of course, would bring great benefit to the human society. It is only because Buddhism does not give a more detailed study into those areas, because Buddhism talks about birth, death, old age, and the sickness, and talk about how to be liberated from samsara. That is the goal of Buddhism. Therefore, Buddhism talks more detailed into selflessness and the selflessness of person and selflessness of Dharma. And that's the function that it talks about. But in terms of other functions in Buddhism, there's not too much of the explanation. But without too much of a detailed explanation doesn't mean that Buddhism doesn't have such understandings. Toku Tenzin wrote a book on neuroscience connected to Tantra. Is it translated into Chinese yet? No? Okay, I read that before. I haven't finished reading it yet, but there are some explanations in his book, because Toku Tenzin has great, extensive understanding of Tantra. If it's not translated, you won't be able to understand it. Anyhow, in terms of consciousness, in terms of the habitual patterns of previous life, of this lifetime, in fact, if you were to use the Buddhist logic, if you were to use the Buddhism's explanation, you'll be able to understand it in detail. But if you were to understand it through the scientist's eye, to understand that the consciousness was suddenly born, then how could you understand about everyone's different habitual patterns and everyone's different memories of previous lives? In their way of explanation, everything is very vague, and it doesn't really make much sense. And the scientists only used a few decades to study. And of course, we have to say that their spirit of doing research and deep study is really wonderful. But on the other, they are all mundane beings. They use their dualistic thoughts to analyze those numbers, and their understanding is very limited. So the Buddhists, I think we should definitely contemplate, though we don't have detailed research in those areas. But if you never really studied in the Buddhism's aspect, then that is unreasonable. You should understand how scientists see it, and you should also understand how Buddhism see it. We should know that the main difference of Buddhism and any other fields of studies, the key difference is the mind and understanding of the coming and going of the mind. The understanding of consciousness, that is the most thorough out of all the areas and fields in this world. And that is the very unique compared to all scientific fields as well as other religions. And the more you study, the more you investigate, the more you practice, the more interesting it gets. But of course, if you don't practice, if you don't study and research, then everything's the same. But if you really study in depth, then you'll be able to understand how interesting it is. Sometimes I get regret of not studying the scientific aspect from my teacher, from his aspect, which is more dialectical materialism. Because at that time, when I was in school, he does not like Buddhism philosophy at all, and I do not like his idea of materialism. And so that really kind of broke our connection and between teacher and student. If the student and teacher didn't start well, didn't have a good impression at the beginning, then even if the teacher teaches really well, the student would have a difficulty to receive the knowledge. But then at the end, the student would not be able to understand and receive that knowledge. So sometimes when I contemplate on that experience of studying the psychology and the science from him, I feel a little regret. So over here, the Buddha continued to say that if one were to desire to cross remote mountains, forests, or great sea, venomous beasts and many evildoers obstruct the way, evil gods, evil ghosts, and ill winds, many hardship and anguish lies ahead. Devotedly pay homage and make offering to Ksitigarbha, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva's images. Then, in these remote mountains, forests, and sea, aforementioned hazard shall disperse. And then Avalokiteshvara devoutly listens to my sermon. Ksitigarbha has limitless inconceivableness. Tens of billions of kalpas are not enough to speak in detail of Mahasattva's power. And if one were to hear Ksitigarbha's name, including those who pay homage, make offering of incense, flowers, clothing, and food, offering result in countless blessings in return. Therefore, the Dharma Assembly of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, usually we would make lots of offerings, and the Pansukha Rinpoche would encourage us to make the most exquisite offering during that Dharma Assembly. And I remember back in my time, our offerings are quite extensive, but it was only with plastic flowers. And after each Dharma assembly, we have to bury all the flowers. If these merit are dedicated to the Dharma Dhatu, one shall ultimately achieve Buddhahood and surpass cycles of life and death. Hence, Avalokiteshvara, you should know, inform those in the world, numbering all Ganges sands. So you should tell all the sentient beings who live in the world, numbering all Ganges sands. Should I continue a bit more? maybe not. Maybe we should finish it next class. Okay, so tomorrow we'll finish this.
好吧。Sonam dai tanche zuba nyan thona nibe jana panshi kirga nanchi ralong chuba yi chubum tsonen roba